After a week of preparation, the alien students were finally ready to attempt their modified live fire exercise. Dr. Morgan had worked with the human instructors to create a course that would be challenging, but not impossible for the aliens to complete. The course was shorter than the human version. The targets were farther away, and the bullets were smaller and slower. Medical teams were positioned every 20 meters instead of every 50. But the ammunition was still real, and the danger was still genuine. Commander Rodriguez stood with the aliens at the starting line. "Remember what you have learned," he said. "The goal is not to be perfect. The goal is to function despite fear. Move carefully, think clearly, and trust your training." Thrixka volunteered to go first. His tentacles were shaking as he picked up the modified weapon designed for his anatomy. The weapon was lighter than the human version and had special grips that his tentacles could hold easily. "Just focus on the first target," Staff Sergeant Santos advised. "Do not think about the whole course. Just move from one target to the next." Thrixka took a deep breath and entered the course. The first target appeared from behind a tree 30 meters away. He raised his weapon and fired. The bullet went wide, missing the target completely. The sound of his own gunshot made him jump and nearly drop his weapon out from the speakers hidden around the course. The sound of enemy fire began. The bullets were not aimed at Thrixka, but they passed close enough that he could hear them whistle through the air. His tentacles went rigid with fear. "Keep moving," Rodriguez called through the radio. "Do not freeze up. Move to the next cover. Position." Thrixka forced himself to run to a concrete barrier 20 meters ahead. His tentacles were still shaking, but he managed to keep hold of his weapon. When the next target appeared, he took more time to aim. This bullet hit the edge of the target. "Better," Santos said through the radio. "Remember to breathe. Control your heartbeat." As Thrixka continued through the course, something strange began to happen. His survival instincts started to take over. His tentacles stopped shaking and began moving more smoothly. His breathing became deeper and more regular. His shots became more accurate. Dr. Morgan watched from the observation bunker with amazement. His stress indicators are actually decreasing as the exercise continues. He is adapting to the danger. By the time Thrixka finished the course, he was moving with confidence. He had hit 6 of the 10 targets, which was considered good for a first attempt. When he emerged from the course, he was breathing hard but smiling. "How do you feel?" Rodriguez asked. "Alive," Thrixka replied. "More alive than I have ever felt before." The Vorthan twins went next. Their crystal bodies were naturally tough, but the harmonic disruption caused by gunfire made it difficult for them to communicate with each other. They had to learn new ways to coordinate their movements. "We cannot use our normal communication methods," Quan said before entering the course. "We will have to rely on visual signals and predetermined plans." The twins moved through the course together, covering each other as they advanced from position to position. When one twin engaged a target, the other watched for additional threats. The constant noise from gunfire forced them to develop new tactical methods. "Remarkable," Dr. Morgan observed. "The acoustic disruption is forcing them to become more versatile soldiers. They are adapting their natural abilities to work in human combat environments." Wisptail surprised everyone by excelling at the exercise. His natural agility, combined with the heightened awareness that came from genuine danger, made him an excellent marksman. He hit 8 of the 10 targets on his first attempt. "Your people would make excellent soldiers," Lieutenant Cooper told him afterward. "You have natural reflexes and the ability to stay calm under pressure." Driftsong had the most difficulty with the physical demands of the course, but its floating ability gave it unique advantages. It could move in 3 dimensions, while the targets could only aim in 2. By the end of the course, It had developed entirely new combat techniques that no human had ever considered. When all the alien students had completed the course, Commander Rodriguez gathered them for debriefing. They sat in a circle on the grass, outside the training area. The afternoon sun was warm, and the sounds of gunfire from other training areas seemed distant and normal now. "How do you feel about the experience?" Rodriguez asked. Thrix-Ka spoke first. "I understand now why humans are so effective in combat. You do not just prepare for war. You make war a part of your daily experience. By training with real danger, you eliminate the shock of actual combat." The Vorthan twins had reached a similar understanding. "Our people train in safety and hope for the best," Quen explained. "Humans train in danger and are prepared for the worst. But there is more too." "It than that," Wisptail added. "The live ammunition is not just about physical training. It is about mental conditioning. You learn to make life or death decisions rapidly and accurately." Driftsong floated closer to the group. "I have learned that fear is not the enemy. Paralysis is the enemy. Humans teach their soldiers to function despite fear, not to eliminate fear entirely." Dr. Morgan nodded with approval. "You are beginning to understand the Deathworld mindset. Humans evolved on a planet where everything was trying to kill them, so they learned to live comfortably with mortal danger." Over the following weeks, the alien students continued their training with increasing confidence. They participated in night exercises, urban combat simulations, and survival training. Each exercise used real weapons and genuine danger, but the aliens were no longer terrified by this. Instead, they began to appreciate the mental clarity that came from training under real pressure. They learned to make better decisions, move more efficiently, and work more effectively as a team. "The fear makes you focus," Thrix-Ka wrote in his personal log. "When you know that a mistake could kill you, your mind becomes perfectly clear. You stop worrying about unimportant things and concentrate completely on survival." The aliens also began to understand why human soldiers were so mentally resilient. By training constantly with the possibility of death, they became comfortable with their own mortality. This freed them from the paralyzing fear that affected soldiers who had never faced real danger. As the exchange program neared its end, the alien students were required to complete a final exercise. This was a full-scale combat simulation that lasted 3 days and involved cooperation between human and alien teams. The exercise took place in a mountainous region 200 kilometers from the academy. Both humans and aliens were equipped with real weapons and had to accomplish specific objectives while being opposed by instructor teams using equally real weapons. During the exercise, the aliens discovered that they could now work effectively alongside human soldiers. They understood human tactics and could function in the chaotic, dangerous environment that humans considered normal for combat. "You have learned to think like Deathworlders," Commander Rodriguez told them on the final day. "You understand that survival requires constant readiness for danger." When the alien students returned to their homeworlds, they carried with them a new understanding of their human allies. They had learned that humans were not fearless warriors who enjoyed violence. Instead, they were careful survivors who prepared constantly for the worst possible situations. The final reports submitted to the Galactic Defense Coalition noted that human training methods, while initially appearing reckless, actually represented a sophisticated understanding of combat psychology. The recommendation was that all coalition species should study human military training techniques, even if they could not fully implement them. Thrix-Ka, in his official report, wrote, "We came to Earth expecting to learn about human technology and tactics. Instead, we learned about human nature. They are not fearless. They are so familiar with fear that it cannot paralyze them. They do not ignore death. They train with it until it becomes just another factor in their calculations." This is why humans are such formidable allies and such dangerous enemies. They have made peace with their own mortality. Several months after the aliens returned home, their governments began implementing modified versions of human training techniques. The results were remarkable. Soldiers who had been trained under genuine stress showed significantly improved performance in actual combat situations. The humans were pleased that their methods were finally being recognized as sophisticated rather than simply savage. Commander Rodriguez, in his final report, noted that the alien students had adapted remarkably well to human training methods. This proves that the Deathworld mindset can be learned, he wrote. It is not just a product of evolution. It is a way of thinking that can be taught to any species willing to accept the risks involved. The exchange program was declared a tremendous success. Plans were made to expand it to other coalition species and to establish permanent human training facilities on allied worlds. But perhaps the most important result was that the galaxy began to understand something crucial about humanity. Humans were not just lucky survivors from a dangerous world. They were master teachers of the skills needed to survive in a dangerous universe. The aliens had learned that humans used live ammunition to train focus, not because they were reckless, but because they understood that real preparation F. Admiral Cainthal stared at the piece of paper in his hands. The human terms were written in simple, clear language. No flowery diplomatic speech. No begging or pleading. Just facts that the humans wanted a non-aggression pact. They wanted clearly marked borders. They wanted fair trade agreements. They wanted to be left alone to govern themselves. In 300 years of imperial expansion, no species had ever presented such reasonable terms. Usually, they offered tribute, slaves, or complete surrender. The humans were offering nothing except the promise not to interfere with imperial business if the Empire did not interfere with theirs. Cainthal looked up at Jake Morrison. The human sat perfectly still, his hands folded on the table. He was waiting for a response with the patience of someone who had all the time in the world. "These terms are impossible," Cainthal said finally. "The Empire does not recognize the sovereignty of inferior species." "I understand your position," Jake replied, "but I think you may want to reconsider." Cainthal's advisors shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The human's tone was not threatening, but there was something underneath it that made them nervous. It was the same tone someone might use when explaining why touching a live electrical wire was a bad idea. "And why would we reconsider?" Cainthal asked. Jake Morrison reached into his jacket again and pulled out a small device. He placed it on the table and pressed a button. A holographic display appeared in the air above them, showing a star map of the local region. "This is human space," Jake said, gesturing to a small cluster of stars marked in blue. 17 colonies, about 50 million people total. Not very impressive compared to the Empire. Cainthal nodded. The human territory was tiny compared to Zephyrian space. "However," Jake continued, "I think you should understand what you would be attacking." The display changed. Now it showed detailed information about each human colony. Population numbers, industrial capacity, military installations. Cainthal studied the data with growing concern. "Every one of our colonies is completely self-sufficient," Jake explained. "We learned early in our expansion that depending on supply lines from other worlds was a weakness. Each colony can produce everything it needs to survive indefinitely. That was unusual. Most species built specialized worlds that depended on trade with other planets. It was more efficient, but it also made them vulnerable to blockades. Furthermore," Jake continued, "every colony is defended by what we call the final protocol." The display showed technical specifications for weapon systems that made Cainthal's blood run cold. The humans had built devices that could crack a planet's crust. They had orbital platforms that could redirect asteroids. They had weapons that could poison entire star systems. You arm your colonies with planet killers? Kainthul asked. We arm them with deterrents, Jake corrected. These weapons are designed to ensure that any species attempting to conquer us will find the victory too expensive to enjoy. Kainthul's chief military advisor, a scarred veteran named Tex Allen, leaned forward. Are you saying that if we attack one of your colonies, you will destroy the planet rather than let us take it? Jake Morrison turned to look at the advisor. I am saying that if you attack one of our colonies, we will ensure that you gain nothing from the attack. The planet, the people, the resources, the infrastructure, all of it will be denied to you. That is madness, Tex Allen said. No rational species would destroy their own worlds. You are correct, Jake agreed. It is not rational. But humans are not always rational when their survival is threatened. We have a saying, if we cannot live free, we will ensure our enemies cannot live at all. Kainthul was beginning to understand why the intelligence reports had been so disturbing. The humans had weaponized their own willingness to die. They had turned their potential extinction into a threat against their enemies. But surely, Kainthul said, you would not sacrifice 50 million people just to spite us? Jake Morrison's expression did not change. Admiral, are you familiar with the Battle of Stalingrad? Kainthul was not. Jake touched his device again, and the holographic display showed historical images from human history. A city in ruins, soldiers fighting in the rubble, civilians starving in basements. One of our cities was surrounded by an enemy army, Jake explained. The enemy demanded surrender. The city's defenders could have given up and saved lives. Instead, they fought for every building, every room, every hallway. The battle lasted for months. When it was over, the city was destroyed, but so was the enemy army. The images showed the aftermath. Piles of rubble where buildings had stood, frozen corpses in the streets, survivors who looked like walking skeletons. The defenders lost almost everything, Jake continued, but they won the war. The enemy never recovered from that defeat. They learned that conquering humans was not worth the cost. Kainthul stared at the images. Your species fought like this? We fought like this many times, Jake said. It is our nature. When cornered, we do not surrender. We make our enemies pay a price they cannot afford. The holographic display changed again, showing more examples from human history. Cities that burned rather than surrender. Armies that fought to the last soldier. Civilians who chose death over slavery. This is why we developed the final protocol, Jake explained. We learned that sometimes the only way to prevent war is to make it clear that there will be no winners. Kainthul felt something he had not experienced in decades. He was looking at a species that had turned their own destruction into a weapon. The humans were not threatening the Empire with conquest. They were threatening it with mutual annihilation. You would really destroy your own colonies? Kainthul asked. If necessary, Jake replied. But we would prefer to trade with you. Our terms are reasonable. We are not asking for tribute or territory. We are offering partnership. Kainthul looked at the paper again. The human terms were indeed reasonable, almost generous. The humans wanted nothing from the Empire except to be left alone. They were offering trade agreements that would benefit both species. Why should we trust you? Kainthul asked. Jake Morrison smiled for the first time since the negotiations began. It was not a pleasant expression. Because we have done our homework, Admiral. We have studied the Zephyrian Empire for months. We know your military capabilities. We know your weaknesses. We know your supply lines and your political structure. We know exactly what it would take to hurt you. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Cainthil's advisors exchanged worried glances. "Are you threatening us?" Tex Allen demanded. "I am explaining why our terms are in your best interest," Jake replied calmly. "War with humanity would be expensive. Even if you won, the cost would be enormous. Your fleets would be damaged. Your soldiers would be dead. Your resources would be exhausted. And for what? To rule over empty worlds and dead colonies?" Cainthil was beginning to see the human strategy. They were not trying to intimidate the Empire with superior force. They were making it clear that victory would be Pyrrhic at best. "What if we simply ignore your terms?" Cainthil asked. "What if we decide that your colonies are not worth the trouble?" "Then we will respect your decision," Jake said. "We will continue to expand our territory and develop our technology. We will continue to prepare for the day when someone decides we are worth the trouble." The implications were clear. If the Empire ignored the humans now, they would grow stronger. In 10 years, or 20, or 50, they might be powerful enough to challenge the Empire directly. Better to make peace now, while the humans were still weak. "I need to consult with my advisors," Cainthil said. "Of course," Jake replied. "Take all the time you need. We are not going anywhere." Cainthil and his delegation left the negotiation chamber and retreated to their private conference room. The moment the door closed, Tex Allen exploded. "This is intolerable," he shouted. "These primitives dare to threaten the Empire." "They are not threatening us," Cainthil said quietly. "They are explaining the consequences of our actions." "What is the difference?" Cainthil activated his own communication device and contacted the Imperial fleet. "Commander Zolthak, I need a full tactical analysis of the human colonies." "How long would it take to conquer them?" The response came back within minutes. Commander Zolthak's voice was troubled. "Admiral, we have been studying their defenses. It would take at least 6 months to conquer all 17 colonies. Casualties would be enormous. And according to our intelligence, they have weapons that could destroy entire star systems if activated. Could they threaten the Empire itself? Not directly. But they could make conquest impossible. Every world we took would be worthless. Every victory would cost us more than it gained." Cainthil closed the communication channel. His advisors were staring at him with expressions of disbelief. "Are you seriously considering accepting their terms?" Tex Allen asked. "I am considering the mathematics," Cainthil replied. "War with the humans would be expensive and ultimately pointless. Peace with them would be profitable and safe. But the Emperor will never accept this. We have never treated any species as equals." Cainthil thought about that. The Emperor was proud and stubborn. He would see accepting human terms as a sign of weakness. But he was also practical. If Cainthil could present the situation correctly, the Emperor might be willing to make an exception. Contact. The next morning, Admiral Cainthil entered the negotiation chamber with a different attitude. He had spent the night reading every intelligence report about humanity that Imperial scouts had gathered. The more he learned, the more disturbed. He became Jake Morrison was already waiting, sitting in the same chair as the day before. He had a cup of coffee in front of him, steam rising from the dark liquid. Cainthil had learned that coffee was a human stimulant, but Jake seemed perfectly calm without it. "Good morning, Admiral," Jake said. "I trust you slept well?" Cainthil had not slept well. He had nightmares about human military tactics that made no logical sense. Soldiers who fought until they ran out of ammunition, then fought with knives. Civilians who turned their own cities into fortresses. Children who were taught that death was preferable to surrender. "I have been reviewing our intelligence reports," Cainthil said. "There are aspects of human military doctrine that I find confusing." Jake nodded. "What would you like to know?" "Your species seems to have an unusual relationship with warfare." Most civilized species fight to achieve objectives: territory, resources, political control. But humans seem to fight for abstract concepts: honor, freedom, principles. That is correct, Jake replied. We have learned that some things are worth dying for, and some things are worth killing for. Cainthal activated his holographic display. I want to show you something from our files. This is a report from the Battle of Kepler 442b. The display showed a human colony world that had been attacked by a species called the Vorthan Collective. The Vorthans were slavers who captured entire populations to work in their mines. They had attacked the human colony, expecting easy prey. According to our intelligence, Cainthal said, the Vorthans landed 50,000 soldiers on your world. The human defenders numbered only 8,000. By all military logic, the battle should have been over in days. Jake sipped his coffee and waited. Instead, Cainthal continued, the battle lasted for 6 months. The humans turned every building into a fortress. They fought from the sewers, from the rooftops, from tunnels they dug under the streets. When they ran out of conventional weapons, they made new ones from scrap metal and mining equipment. The display showed images from the battle. Human defenders using construction equipment as weapons. Civilians building mounds in their basements. Children as young as 12 carrying messages. Between resistance cells, the Vorthans eventually retreated, Cainthal said. They had lost 37,000 soldiers. The human colony was in ruins, but it was still free. Jake nodded. The Vorthans learned an important lesson that day. They never attacked another human colony. But why? Cainthal asked. Why did your people choose to fight when surrender would have saved lives? Jake Morrison set down his coffee cup. Admiral, may I tell you a story? Cainthal nodded. 200 years ago, there was a human nation called Poland. It was invaded by 2 larger nations that wanted to divide its territory between them. The Polish people could have surrendered. Their military was outnumbered 10-1. Their cities were being bombed. Their government had fled the country. Jake touched his device, and the holographic display changed to show images from human history. Soldiers in old-fashioned uniforms. Civilians hiding in basements. Cities burning in the distance. Instead of surrendering, the Polish people formed an underground resistance. They sabotaged enemy supply lines. They rescued prisoners. They passed information to allied nations. They fought for 6 years, even though they had no hope of victory. The images showed the aftermath. Destroyed cities, mass graves. Survivors who looked like walking skeletons. The cost was terrible, Jake continued. 6 million Polish citizens died. Their country was devastated, but they never surrendered. And when the war ended, Poland was free again. Cainthal stared at the images. They sacrificed 6 million people for an abstract concept? They sacrificed 6 million people so that their children could live in freedom, Jake corrected. That is the difference between humans and other species. We think in terms of generations, not just immediate survival. The holographic display changed again, showing more examples from human history. A city called Leningrad that was besieged for almost 3 years. A small group of defenders at a place called Thermopylae who fought to the death against impossible odds. A general named Custer who led his men into a battle they could not win. This is why the final protocol exists, Jake explained. We learned that sometimes the only way to protect future generations is to make the present generation too expensive to conquer. Cainthal was beginning to understand something fundamental about human psychology. Other species fought for rational reasons: survival, resources, territory. Humans fought for ideas. And ideas, unlike territory or resources, could not be conquered. But surely, Cainthal said, your leaders must understand that some battles cannot be won. Jake Morrison smiled grimly. "Admiral, let me show you something else." The display changed to show technical specifications for human weapon systems. Cainthul recognized some of them from the previous day's presentation, but there were new ones that made his blood run cold. "This is what we call the archive," Jake said. "It contains detailed plans for weapons that we hope we will never need." To use, Cainthul studied the specifications. There were weapons that could destroy entire star systems, biological agents that could make planets uninhabitable for centuries, devices that could turn a species' own technology against them. "Why do you show me this?" Cainthul asked. "Because I want you to understand the choice you are making," Jake replied. "The Zephyrian Empire is strong. Your technology is advanced. Your military is powerful. But you are not prepared for the kind of war that humans fight." The display showed tactical analyses of previous imperial conquests. Cainthul recognized the patterns. The Empire would arrive with overwhelming force. The target species would realize they were outmatched. They would surrender or be destroyed quickly and efficiently. "Your military doctrine is based on shock and awe," Jake continued. "You defeat your enemies by showing them that resistance is futile. It is an excellent strategy against rational opponents." Cainthul did not like where this was going. "And humans are not rational?" "Humans are very rational," Jake said. "But our rationality is based on different assumptions. We assume that some things are worth any cost. We assume that death is preferable to slavery. We assume that our children's freedom is more important than our own lives." The display showed projections of what a war between humans and Zephyrians would look like. The numbers were staggering. Even if the Empire won, the cost would be enormous. Millions of soldiers dead, hundreds of ships destroyed, entire fleets tied up for years in occupation duty. "And what would you gain?" Jake asked. "Empty worlds? Dead colonies? The satisfaction of knowing you conquered a species that would rather die than submit?" Cainthul stared at the projections. Every scenario showed the same result. The Empire would win, but the victory would be Pyrrhic. The resources required to conquer and hold human territory would cripple imperial expansion for decades. "There is another option," Jake said quietly. Display changed to show trade projections. Humans had resources that the Empire needed: rare minerals, agricultural products, advanced manufacturing techniques. The Empire had resources that humans wanted: energy technology, star charts, diplomatic connections with other species. "We could be partners instead of enemies," Jake continued. "Human innovation combined with Zephyrian infrastructure. Your knowledge of the galaxy combined with our problem-solving abilities. Together, we could build something greater than either species could achieve alone." Cainthul studied the trade projections. The potential benefits were enormous. The Empire would gain access to human technology and manufacturing capacity. Humans would gain access to Zephyrian markets and diplomatic networks. "Why should we trust you?" Cainthul asked. Jake Morrison leaned back in his chair. "Because trust is the only rational choice. You have seen what we are capable of when we are enemies. Imagine what we could accomplish as allies." Cainthul thought about that. The humans had shown him their capacity for destruction, but they had also shown him their capacity for innovation and determination. A species that could turn their own willingness to die into a weapon could probably turn their creativity into something equally powerful. What guarantees do we have? Cainthul asked. "The same guarantee that prevents us from destroying each other," Jake replied. "Mutual benefit. As long as our partnership serves both species, it will continue. If either side breaks the agreement, both sides lose." It was elegant in its simplicity. No complex treaties or enforcement mechanisms. Just the recognition that cooperation was more profitable than conflict. "I need to discuss this with the Emperor," Cainthul said. Of course, Jake replied. But first, let me show you one more thing. The display changed to show a map of the galaxy. Human territory was marked in blue, Zephyrian space in purple. Other species were shown in different colors. Green for the Altarian Federation, red for the Nexus Collective, yellow for the independent worlds. This is the current political situation, Jake said. The Empire controls about 30% of known space. But look at the trends. The display showed population, growth rates, technological advancement, military XP. 3 hours passed before Emperor Vexter contacted the station again. Cainthul had spent the time reviewing intelligence reports and running tactical simulations. Every analysis reached the same conclusion. War with humanity would be expensive and ultimately pointless. Jake Morrison had spent the time reading. He pulled a small book from his jacket and sat quietly, turning pages with the same calm patience he showed in everything else. Cainthul noticed that the book was not electronic, but made of actual paper. He wondered what kind of information humans considered important enough to preserve in physical form. When the Emperor's image appeared in the holographic display, his expression was troubled. Cainthul could see that he had been thinking hard about the human proposal. Mr. Morrison, the Emperor said, I have reviewed your terms. They are reasonable. Thank you, Your Majesty, Jake replied. However, I have concerns about your species' military philosophy. You claim to want peace, but everything in your history suggests you are a warlike people. Jake closed his book and set it on the table. Your Majesty, may I ask you a question? The Emperor nodded. In your empire's 300 years of expansion, how many species have you conquered without fighting? The Emperor thought for a moment. Very few, perhaps a dozen out of 47. And why did those species surrender without fighting? Because they understood that resistance was futile. Jake nodded. Exactly. They made a rational calculation. Fighting the Empire would cost more than surrendering to it. Yes, humans make the same calculation, Jake explained. But we reach a different conclusion. For us, surrender costs more than fighting. This is why we appear warlike to other species. We fight when others would surrender. The Emperor leaned forward. Explain. Jake activated the holographic display. It showed historical examples of human resistance movements. People fighting against occupation forces. Civilians sabotaging enemy supply lines. Soldiers choosing death over capture. Other species fight for territory or resources, Jake continued. When those things are lost, they surrender. But humans fight for ideas, and ideas cannot be conquered. The display showed more examples. A man standing in front of a line of tanks. A woman hiding refugees in her basement. Children carrying messages for resistance fighters. This is what makes humans dangerous, Jake said. Not our weapons or our technology. Our willingness to die for abstract concepts like freedom and dignity. Cainthul was beginning to understand. The humans were not threatening the Empire with superior firepower. They were threatening it with something much worse, the prospect of ruling over people who would never truly submit. But surely, the Emperor sighed, you must understand that some compromises are necessary for civilization to function. Of course, Jake agreed. Humans compromise all the time. We follow laws. We pay taxes. We accept authority when it is legitimate and beneficial. Then what is the difference? Jake Morrison was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. Your Majesty, the difference is choice. When humans choose to submit to authority, they can also choose to withdraw that submission. This makes U.S. unreliable subjects, but excellent partners. The Emperor studied Jake's face, looking for signs of deception or hidden meaning. He found neither. You are saying that humans can be trusted to keep agreements because you choose to keep them, not because you are forced to keep them? Exactly, Jake replied. Forced compliance is temporary. Chosen cooperation is permanent. Cain Thul watched the exchange with fascination. The human was teaching the Emperor something about power that 3 centuries of conquest had not revealed. True authority came not from the ability to force obedience, but from the ability to inspire cooperation. What guarantees do I have that humans will honor this agreement? The Emperor asked. Jake Morrison smiled. The same guarantee that you honor your agreements with other imperial worlds. It is in our best interest to cooperate. But imperial worlds are part of the Empire. They have no choice. And that is why they rebel, Jake said quietly. The statement hung in the air like a weapon. Cain Thul felt his blood run cold. The human had just spoken the truth that every imperial official knew but never discussed. Conquered peoples eventually rebelled. It was not a matter of if, but when. Are you threatening rebellion? The Emperor asked, his voice dangerously quiet. I am explaining why partnership is superior to conquest, Jake replied calmly. Conquered peoples rebel because they have nothing to lose. Partners cooperate because they have everything to gain. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. Cain Thul could see him thinking, weighing the human's words against his own experience. Show me your military capabilities, the Emperor said. Finally, Jake touched his device. The holographic display changed to show detailed specifications for human weapons and defenses. Cain Thul had seen some of this information before, but the complete picture was even more disturbing. Every human colony was defended by orbital platforms that could destroy incoming fleets. Every city had underground bunkers that could shelter the entire population for months. Every civilian was trained in basic military tactics and guerrilla warfare. This is not a military, the Emperor observed. This is an entire species organized for war. This is an entire species organized for survival, Jake corrected. We learned early in our history that peace is not the natural state of the universe. It must be actively maintained. The display showed tactical analyses of human defensive strategies. Cain Thul recognized the patterns. The humans had studied every successful resistance movement in galactic history and incorporated the best tactics into their own doctrine. You are prepared to fight a war that could last centuries, the Emperor said. We are prepared to fight a war that will last as long as necessary, Jake replied. But we would prefer to avoid that war entirely. How? Jake Morrison leaned forward. By making cooperation more attractive than conquest. By building something together that neither species could achieve alone. The display changed to show projections of joint human Zephyrian projects. Exploration fleets that could map unknown regions of the galaxy. Research stations that could solve problems that had puzzled scientists for centuries. Trade networks that could bring prosperity to both species. This is what we could accomplish, Jake said. Your empire has the resources and infrastructure. Humans have the innovation and determination. Together, we could build a future that our children will thank us for. The Emperor studied the projections with obvious interest. Cain Thul could see him calculating the potential benefits. What about other species? The Emperor asked. How would they react to a human Zephyrian alliance? Jake touched his device again. The display showed intelligence reports on other galactic powers, the Altarians, the Nexus Collective, the independent worlds. All of them were growing stronger and more ambitious. They would be concerned, Jake admitted. A human Zephyrian alliance would be the most powerful force in known space. But that is exactly why we need to form it. Explain. The galaxy is becoming more crowded and more competitive, Jake said. In 50 years, there will be a dozen major powers instead of 3 or 4. Competition will become conflict. Conflict will become war. The display showed projections of future galactic politics. Without strong leadership, the region would descend into chaos as different species fought for dominance. But if the Empire allies with humanity, Jake continued, we can provide stability. We can mediate disputes. We can prevent wars before they start. Kane Thao was impressed by the scope of the human's vision. Jake was not just thinking about human-Zephyrine relations. He was thinking about the entire galaxy. You want to rule the galaxy? The Emperor asked. We want to protect it, Jake replied. There is a difference. The Emperor was quiet for several minutes. Kane Thul watched his expression change as he considered the implications of the human proposal. This alliance, the Emperor said finally, how would it work in practice? Jake activated a new set of projections. We start with small projects, joint patrols of disputed territories, shared research facilities, combined exploration missions. As trust builds, we expand cooperation. And command structure? Equal partnership. Neither species dominates the other. Decisions are made by consensus. The Emperor frowned. The Empire does not share authority. The Empire has never had a partner capable of sharing authority, Jake pointed out. Humans are not asking to join the Empire. We are asking the Empire to join us in creating something new. It was a radical concept. The Zephyrine Empire had always been about dominance and control. The idea of true partnership with another species was almost unthinkable, but Kane Thul could see the wisdom in it. An alliance with humanity would give the Empire access to human innovation and determination. It would also provide legitimacy that conquest alone could never achieve. I need to discuss this with my advisors, the Emperor said. Of course, Your Majesty, Jake replied. But may I suggest that you also discuss it with your people? This decision will affect every citizen of the Empire. The Emperor's expression darkened. I do not need permission from my subjects to make policy. You do not need permission, Jake agreed. But you might want their support. The strongest alliances are built on popular approval, not royal decree. Kenthil held his breath. The human was challenging the Emperor's authority in the most diplomatic way. Pause. Emperor Vexter opened his 6 eyes and looked directly at Jake Morrison. The silence in the negotiation chamber was complete. Kane Thul held his breath, waiting for the decision that would change galactic history. Mr. Morrison, the Emperor said slowly, in 300 years of imperial expansion, no species has ever spoken to me the way you have spoken today. Jake remained perfectly still, his calm eyes never leaving the Emperor's face. Most species beg for mercy, the Emperor continued. Others threaten us with their weapons. A few try to bribe us with offers of tribute. But you have done something different. You have offered us partnership? Yes, Your Majesty. You have also shown us that conquest of your species would be possible but pointless. Victory would cost more than it would gain. That is correct. The Emperor leaned back in his chair. Kane Thul could see him weighing centuries of tradition against the promise of a different future. Admiral Kane Thul, the Emperor said, double quotes, yes, Your Majesty? What is your assessment of this human proposal? Kane Thul chose his words carefully. Your Majesty, from a military perspective, war with humanity would be expensive and difficult. From an economic perspective, partnership would be highly profitable. From a strategic perspective, alliance with humans would strengthen our position against other galactic powers. And from a political perspective, Kane Thul hesitated. This was dangerous ground. Your Majesty, alliance with humans would require us to treat them as equals. This would be unprecedented. Unprecedented, the Emperor repeated. Yes, it would be. Jake Morrison spoke quietly. Your Majesty, may I tell you about a human leader named Alexander? The Emperor nodded. Jake activated the holographic display. It showed images from human history. A young man in ancient armor, leading soldiers across vast distances, conquering city after city. Alexander built one of the largest empires in human history, Jake explained. He conquered everything from Greece to India. His armies were unstoppable. The images showed the extent of Alexander's conquests, an empire that stretched across 3 continents. But Alexander understood something important about empire building, Jake continued. He did not just conquer his enemies. He recruited them. The display showed Alexander adopting the customs of conquered peoples, marrying foreign princesses, promoting capable foreigners to positions of authority, building an empire based on inclusion rather than domination. When Alexander died, his empire lasted for centuries, Jake said, not because it was held together by force, but because it was held together by mutual benefit. Emperor Vexter studied the images with obvious interest. And you believe the Zephyrian Empire should follow this example? I believe the Zephyrian Empire could become greater than Alexander's, Jake replied, but only if it learns to see strength in partnership rather than domination. The Emperor was quiet for a long moment. King Thul could see him thinking about the comparison. The Zephyrian Empire was already larger than Alexander's had been, but it was held together entirely by force. Every conquered world was a potential source of rebellion. What would this partnership look like? The Emperor asked. Jake Morrison stood up and walked to the holographic display. With a few touches, he brought up a comprehensive plan for human Zephyrian cooperation. We start with a formal non-aggression pact, Jake explained. Neither species attacks the other. Both species respect each other's territorial sovereignty. The Emperor nodded. This was reasonable. Next, we establish trade agreements. Humans provide rare minerals, agricultural products, and manufacturing expertise. Zephyrians provide energy, technology, transportation networks, and diplomatic connections. Images showed the potential benefits. Human factories powered by Zephyrian energy technology. Zephyrian ships carrying human goods to markets across the galaxy. Both species prospering from the exchange. Then we begin joint projects, Jake continued. Scientific research, exploration missions, infrastructure development. Each project builds trust and demonstrates the benefits of cooperation. The display showed ambitious plans. Joint research stations that could solve problems neither species could handle alone. Exploration fleets that could map unknown regions of the galaxy. Transportation networks that could connect human and Zephyrian space. Finally, we establish a formal alliance, Jake said. Not conquest or absorption, but genuine partnership. 2 independent species working together for mutual benefit. The Emperor studied the plans carefully. King Thul could see him calculating the potential benefits and risks. This alliance, the Emperor said, how would decisions be made? By consensus, Jake replied. Major decisions would require agreement from both species. Minor decisions would be handled by joint committees with equal representation. And if we disagree on something important, then we negotiate until we find a solution that works for everyone, or we agree to disagree and handle the matter separately. The Emperor frowned. That seems inefficient. It is more efficient than war, Jake pointed out. Negotiation takes time, but conquest takes blood. King Thul found himself nodding. The human was right. War was expensive in ways that went beyond mere economics. It consumed lives, resources, and time. It created enemies and instability. Even victory came with enormous costs. What about other species? The Emperor asked. How would they react to this alliance? Jake touched the display again. It showed intelligence assessments of major galactic powers. The Altarians would be concerned, but ultimately supportive, Jake said. They prefer stability to chaos. The Nexus Collective would be suspicious, but would probably want to establish their own trade agreements with the Alliance. The independent worlds would see it as protection against more aggressive powers. And if someone tries to break up the Alliance? Jake Morrison smiled grimly. Then they would face the combined military might of both species. That would be a very expensive mistake. The Emperor was quiet for several minutes. Kane Thull watched him consider the proposal from every angle. Military, economic, political, strategic. The more he thought about it, the more sense it made. "Mr. Morrison," the Emperor said finally, "you have presented a compelling argument for partnership, but I have one final question." "Yes, Your Majesty?" "Why? Should I trust you?" Jake Morrison walked back to his chair and sat down. He looked directly at the Emperor with the same calm confidence he had shown throughout the negotiations. "Your Majesty," he said, "you should not trust me. You should trust the mathematics." The Emperor raised an eyebrow. "This alliance works because both species benefit from it," Jake explained. "As long as cooperation is more profitable than conflict, both sides have an incentive to maintain the partnership. Trust is not required, only rational self-interest." Kane Thull was impressed by the elegance of the argument. The human was not asking for faith or goodwill. He was proposing a system that worked regardless of personal feelings. "However," Jake continued, "if you want to know whether humans can be trusted to keep their word, I suggest you look at our history with previous allies." The display showed examples of human alliances, treaties that had lasted for centuries, military partnerships that had survived multiple wars, trade agreements that had continued even during difficult times. "Humans honor their commitments," Jake said simply, "not because we are naturally virtuous, but because our survival has always depended on reliable partnerships." The Emperor studied the historical examples. Kane Thull could see him comparing human behavior with Zephyrian experience. The Empire had always relied on force to maintain loyalty. Humans seemed to rely on mutual benefit. "Admiral Kane Thull," the Emperor said, "contact the fleet. Stand down to normal patrol status." Kane Thull blinked his 6 eyes in surprise. "Your Majesty, you heard me. Stand down the fleet." Kane Thull activated his communication device. "All ships, this is Admiral Kane Thull. Stand down from attack formation. Resume normal patrol status." The acknowledgments came back immediately. 100 warships powered down their weapons and moved to defensive positions. Jake Morrison nodded approvingly. "Thank you, Your Majesty. That is an excellent first step." "Mr. Morrison," the Emperor said, "I am prepared to accept your terms, but I want to make something clear." "Yes, Your Majesty?" "This alliance will be tested. Other species will try too. Drive us apart. Political pressures will create tensions. Economic problems will cause disputes." Jake nodded. "That is inevitable. When those tests come, I want to know that humans will honor their commitments." Jake Morrison stood up and walked to the holographic display. He touched a control, and the display showed the text of the proposed treaty. Formal language outlining the terms of the alliance. "Your Majesty," Jake said, "I am authorized to sign this agreement on behalf of the human colonies." The Emperor's image leaned forward. "You have that authority?" "I have that authority." Kane Thull watched as Jake Morrison produced a physical pen from his jacket. He signed the treaty document with careful, precise handwriting. Then he looked up at the Emperor. "The agreement is signed, Your Majesty. Humanity stands ready to honor its commitments." Emperor Vexter was quiet for a moment. Then he spoke in a voice that carried the weight of 3 centuries of imperial tradition. "Admiral Kane Thull, you are authorized to sign this treaty on behalf of the Zephyrian Empire." Kane Thull felt his hands shaking as he approached the display. He was about to make history. The first treat